Hey, what is up everybody, it's Animac here for Anime Uproar, and the MHA ending is shaping up to be an absolute scorcher. The arch villain, All For One, is at his strongest point ever. He has attained godly power and he is in his prime. But his quirk is also killing him. Will All For One reach Shigaraki and implant his quirk factor into him? What if he implants his quirk factor into Deku instead? What if All For One's plan all along was to use Deku as his ultimate vessel? A vessel that possesses both All For One and One For All. Let's get into it. You guys know the drill. If you enjoy our MHA video, you want to see more in the future, leave a quick like and comment right now. Quick thank you to the sponsor of this video, the one, the only, Raid Shadow Legends. I feel like everyone's heard of Raid by now, but what is Raid? The R stands for regular updates. If you've tried Raid before but you haven't gone back in a while, hop on again because they've got tons of updates dropping every month. The A stands for Arena, where you can test your strength against other players and prove the dominance of your unique champions. The I stands for Immensely Satisfying Battle System, which gives you intense PvE and PvP content, including tactical upgrade systems, epic strategic gameplay, and much more. Finally, the D stands for Do It Now. Click that link in the description and find out for yourself why everyone is always talking about Raid Shadow Legends. And guess what? Raid's 4th anniversary is finally here, and after 4 years, they've gone absolutely crazy with the giveaways. I'm talking dedicated offers, free gifts, promo codes, and a brand new fusion event where you can get your hands on an anniversary-themed legendary champion. Right now, you can use the promo code 4YearsRaid to get some extra stuff. For Amazon Prime members who just got Gembo, keep an eye out for the next drop with some powerful Savage gear. It's available from March 2nd until March 30th. New players, use my link or scan the QR code right here and get a free starter pack with this cool in-game loot. Try it out for yourself. Click the link in the description or click the QR code right now. Finally, this video will contain MHA manga spoilers, so please proceed with caution. You have been warned. In the previous chapter, we saw that Toga was unable to replicate the quirks of anyone that she doesn't truly love. So she was unable to use the quirks of Shigaraki, Dabi, and All For One, even after successfully cloning them using twice his quirk. We also witnessed a huge twist as the absolute monster Gigantomachia appeared on the Gunga battlefield. As we know, Machia is incredibly loyal to his master All For One, so at that point it looked like it was all over for the heroes. They were about to be destroyed by Machia, and All For One was going to use that opportunity to reach Shigaraki. However, instead of attacking All For One's enemies, Gigantomachia did something shocking. He attacked All For One himself. That's because Shinso had managed to brainwash Machia into thinking that he, Shinso, was his master, All For One, leading Machia to conclude that he had to obey all of Shinso's commands. The success of this strategy could also have something to do with the fact that All For One now looks completely different from what he looked like before. And he probably sounds a lot different too, since his body has been rewound to when he was much younger, around the age of a teenager. The latest chapter begins with the full breakdown and explanation of how the massive Gigantomachia twist came into being. It all started at the Deku hospital ruins after news spread about Shoto defeating Dabi, news that we now know ended up being premature. There, at the ruins of Deku Hospital, a special containment structure had been created in order to keep Machia trapped inside. But a bunch of villains decided that they would break him out. Multiple heroes and hero students were guarding Machia at that location, and once the villains showed up, a full-fledged battle commenced. At first, most of the NPC villains are just dealt with by Juzo Honenuki from Class 1B, who used his softening quirk to trap a bunch of them in what is essentially quicksand. But Juzo's quirk cannot help against that villain with a creepy tube mask who was responsible for killing Midnight. That villain is able to float through the air, and he is also able to make several other villains float along with him, which renders Juzo's ground-based quirk useless. What's more, this tube-face villain and his comrades came prepared. They are here specifically because they want to break Machia out of his confinement, and they brought a device that can broadcast All For One's voice loud enough for Machia to hear it. So it's a similar situation to Spinner trying to use an audio device to awaken Kurogiri. And even though Machia is sealed away inside a concrete structure, one of his many quirks gives him an extremely sensitive sense of hearing, like the hearing of a dog. The fact that Machia possesses this quirk practically guarantees that he will hear the recording device. Mount Lady is there along with a bunch of hero students, including Juzo and also Mineta, Mina Kirishima, and Yui Kodai from class 1B. Mount Lady knows exactly how dangerous Machia is, and she immediately rushes at the villains in an attempt to prevent them from accomplishing their mission. Yui from class 1B uses her quirk Size to turn a normal-sized wrench into a gigantic warhammer-sized weapon for Mount Lady to wield. She then starts using the giant wrench to try to swat the villains out of the sky. By the way, if you're interested in Yui's quirk Size and the other class 1B quirks, I am currently working on a video that will explain all of them in detail and include all the updates and upgrades as of the final arc of the story. If that's a video you'd like to check out when it comes out, please subscribe right now and click the notification bell to turn on all notifications. That is the only way to make sure that YouTube will actually inform you when the video is live. Unfortunately for Mount Lady, it's already too late. The villain's plan has already succeeded because Machia heard what he needed to hear, and he suddenly bursts out of his confinement as the entire building that he had been contained in collapses into dust. It's one thing to try to sedate and confine Machia when he is relatively calm, but when he hears his master calling him, his strength multiplies many times over and he becomes an explosive, overpowered monster that simply cannot be contained. The heroes and hero students are now in major trouble. I'm sure I don't need to explain to any of you guys who are watching this video right now just how insanely strong Machia is. And the last time that he was on the loose, many civilians and heroes died, including of course Midnight. The heroes are completely finished now unless they have another final trick up their sleeve, and as Kirishima reveals, luckily they do. Back when this latest war first started, the heroes were able to secretly warp Shinso to this location and he has been hiding ever since. So the villains aren't even aware that he is there. Well, most of the villains aren't, because when Kirishima runs to the spot where Shinso was hiding, he finds that sludge villain from chapter 1 trying to take over Shinso's body. When the villains arrived, the sludge villain decided to go into hiding and wait it out because he's a coward. But when he accidentally stumbled upon Shinso's hiding spot, he decided to try to take over his body. Thankfully, Kirishima is having none of it, and he immediately engages the sludge villain in battle. Meanwhile, Machia completely overpowers Mount Lady very quickly, and he demands to know where his master is. And just as Machia is about to finish off Mount Lady with his giant claws, Mina steps in and unleashes a brand new level of power. Pushing her acid quirk to its maximum output to straight up plus ultra, she unleashes an attack called Acid Man Alma, and this attack actually manages to break down and destroy Machia's claws. Mount Lady is shocked that Mina was able to produce such a strong substance with her quirk, but Mina doesn't even wait around to brag about her newfound strength. Mina has been feeling terrible about not being stronger earlier and not being able to prevent the people she cared about from getting hurt, including of course Midnight. So she started taking inspiration from the training methods of Shoto and Bakugo, and as a result she has taken her quirk and her strength to the next level. She is sick and tired of failing to protect the ones she cares about, and so her next move is to rush over to where Kirishima is fighting the sludge villain. She then excretes some of her acid into the sludge, and the acid begins to immediately mix around inside the villain's body. The sludge villain knows that this is very bad news, and he tries to run away. And while he is panicking and attempting to escape, Shinso manages to trick him into responding to him. As soon as that happens, Shinso is able to control and subdue him. With Shinso now safe and free to do as he pleases, that trick that the heroes had up their sleeve is finally revealed. Shinso uses that special rope cloth that Aizawa taught him how to use in order to get up to Machia's head, and he then uses his persona chords to call out to Machia in the voice of All for One himself. Shinso was able to use recordings of All For One's voice from Tartarus to copy his voice with persona chords. And that is enough to trick Machia. Machia responds to the sound of All For One's voice, and he is placed under Shinso's control as a result of his brainwashing quirk. After that, Shinso orders Machia to swat down everyone who is floating in the air. Machia obeys and proceeds to take down the floating villains, and the heroes win the battle. The villains fail in their mission to retrieve Machia, and they are then restrained and detained by the heroes. This explains why Machia was released from captivity in the first place, and how he came under Shinso's control. Now, we all knew that Shinso was able to trick Machia using a combination of persona chords and his quirk. But at first, I thought that the heroes might have intentionally released Machia in order to get him under their control and gain an upper hand over the villains. In my video on the previous chapter, I said that this was a massive risk. Yes, Machia is a huge asset for the heroes. And yes, the heroes are extremely desperate at this point in time. But releasing him could also spell doom for all of Japan if All For One is able to regain control. We know now that the heroes didn't actually release him on purpose. Taking that risk was not their idea. But once he was already released thanks to the efforts of the villains, the heroes made the best of the situation thanks to Shinso. Right after all of this happens, Mount Lady receives a call which informs her that All For One has managed to rewind himself and is now once again in his prime. This leads the heroes to make the difficult decision to bring Machia to Gunga in the hopes that they could keep him under control long enough to defeat All For One. The chapter ends back in the present moment, as the colossal battle against All For One rages in absolutely epic fashion. Dark Shadow, Mount Lady, Gigantomachia, and all the other heroes are attacking All For One in what looks more like some sort of mosaic from Greek mythology than a manga panel. And in fact, this panel is almost certainly inspired by popular depictions of the Titanomachia, the war between the Olympian gods and the Titans in Greek mythology. Both Gigantomachia's name and the name Tartarus are direct references to this mythological conflict. So I'm not surprised that Horikoshi is bringing out the Greek mythology references yet again. We also see what looks to be two helicopters hovering above the battlefield. Then we see All For One's face looking absolutely epic with his eyes completely white. He truly looks like some sort of dark god of destruction. And that is how this chapter ends. Okay, those last panels were crazy and exciting, but what's the deal with those random helicopters? Was this the media filming the battle? Are these villains who are coming to help All For One and transport him to Shigaraki? We know that the villains are likely the reason why the civilian evacuees from the UA grounds never made it to their evacuation checkpoint. So I wonder if these helicopters could be related to that part of All For One's plan. Were they maybe sent by those spies who had infiltrated the UA? I don't mean Aoyama and his family, but the other ones. Definitely let me know what you think about the helicopters down in the comments. Also, Mina and Kirishima had a short but heartwarming moment in this chapter that we really have to talk about. During the battle, Mina was extremely tempted to seek revenge against those villains who are directly responsible for killing Midnight, especially the Tube Face villain, but she takes inspiration from Shoji. Shoji was bullied and mistreated his entire life just because he looked different, and yet he refused to be consumed by ideas of revenge. Instead, he chose to focus on becoming a better person and a better hero. This is exactly what Mina intends to do. And even though she shows impressive self-control and restraint, and even though she does a lot to help in the battle, when the battle ends, Mina feels like once again she wasn't useful because Shinso was the one who saved the day, and she then collapses from dehydration after overusing her quirk. But as she falls, Kirishima grabs her and holds her in his arms. Kirishima tells Mina that she was never useless and that she's always been his hero. And if you know anything about their backstory and how much Mina inspired Kirishima, then you know that this panel hits different. Man, I ship these two so hard. Horn buddies forever. Okay, now back to the big boss, All For One. We know that even though he is now in his prime and probably stronger than he ever was before, his quirk is also currently killing him because he chose to rewind his body to the point that it will eventually be rewound right out of existence. And yet, even though he is doomed to disappear soon, Horikoshi is still hinting that this guy is incredibly powerful, and he still isn't done yet. I think his eyes turning pure white is a hint that something big is about to happen. He still has one last great power move in him, and I think that he will reach Shigaraki and Deku before he dies. But what happens then? Will All For One succeed in implanting his quirk factor into Shigaraki? And could this kill Shigaraki from the inside as All For One takes over? Or would Shigaraki just kill All For One instead and become even stronger than before? And while it would be interesting to see the internal conflict between Shigaraki and All For One's original quirk factor, we've kind of already seen the internal conflict between these guys. I think that an even more interesting scenario would be if All For One tried to implant his quirk factor into Deku instead. Since Deku is a quirkless user of One For All, meaning that he already possesses One For All and his body isn't going to be prematurely destroyed because of it, taking over Deku's body would be ideal for All For One. Not only would he then possess the All For One quirk factor, but he would also possess the One For All quirk factor that he has been trying to steal for like 100 years. And on top of that, he would have a fresh new vessel at his disposal. Not gonna lie, the inner conflict between Deku and the vestiges of One For All and All For One and the All For One quirk factor would be absolutely incredible to see. There is just so much history there, and I wonder what this potential turn of events could do to Deku. Could All For One actually take control of Deku's body and use One For All for the first time? Could Deku's personality and mental stability deteriorate as a result of this internal struggle? Could the raw power of both One For All and All For One overwhelm Deku's body and lead to his ultimate destruction? If I'm being honest, I'm now kinda hoping that All For One does try to take over Deku instead of Shigaraki. Because before the story ends, I really want to see what would happen if both the All For One quirk factor and the One For All quirk factor ended up inside the same body. What do you guys think will happen to Deku if All For One implants the All For One quirk factor inside of him? Let me know down below. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more in the future, please leave a like right now, it means a lot. And if you are among the over 50% of people who watch our videos but haven't taken the time to subscribe yet, do me a big favor and make this the video that you subscribe and hit that notification bell to turn on all notifications. Subscribing on YouTube is completely free, but it helps me out a lot. You can also hit me up on Twitter and Instagram at AnimeUproar. Thanks again to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video. Check them out, link in the description. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, see ya, Space Cowboys!